Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Today we're talking about Season 3, Episode 22, Explorers. Before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
Absolutely. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are an absolute riot. We're an awesome time. Try to keep everything Star Trek and sci-fi specific, which during this last week was pretty hard to do because if you lived anywhere around us or in this kind of western side of the United States anyway, you would know that we were all facing winter storm, the once in a generation yet somehow second time in 2 years that we've had winter storm that pretty much shut down everything, at least everything local for a while. It wasn't as bad. I will say that it wasn't as bad as the one that we had 2 years ago, but it was still enough that we hadn't totally recovered infrastructure wise, at least in the greater Austin, Texas area anyway. That we still had a lot of people who were without power and actually are still without power today. So,
Yeah.
and here we are, some what 5 6 days from when it initially kicked off, and
Yeah.
there are still something on the order of like 120,000 people still without
Mm.
power
Didn't
in
know it was that
in
high,
Austin.
but I didn't
Yeah,
know there were still people without power. Yeah.
yeah.
Whew.
So pretty crazy week. So before we get started, as always, like to check in, of course. But since this is obviously very specific here, David, how did you do during snowpocalypse, as I like to
2.0.
call it? Yes,
Yeah.
snowpocalypse 2.0.
Yeah, Snowmageddon, as I called it in our text messages together.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's see. It was Wednesday morning, I believe it was, when it got the worst. Like that was the worst. Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So it was freezing rain for everyone who was just curious, and that meant that power lines are going down and stuff. So we lost power in the first, like, from 7:45 to about 11. Though I first saw the power starting to flicker out around 4:30 in the morning because my lights in my room came on, and they woke me up. I was like, "Why are my lights on?" Because the power had just flashed, and then I started hearing popping of trees losing their branches outside, and then all morning, people started having their branches come down, and then so work said, "Hey, don't come in. This is not a good day, obviously, for people to coming in, so don't come in." And then the next day, the store I work at still didn't have power, and so they said, "Well, there's no point in having you come in. It doesn't even have power, so just take the day off." I was like, "Great." And then on Friday, throughout the rest of the weekend, through today, Sunday, we're recording. I was at my men's retreat for church, so that was great. The weather actually today got back up to 70. It was a
Yeah, it was a
beautiful
beautiful
day,
day.
a
Yeah, beautiful
glorious
day
day.
here.
Got to spend time with friends from church for a couple days, and then my family, my brothers and his family live very close to where we were having our retreat, and my parents then came a little later. So my dad had his birthday. We kind of celebrated his birthday and saw my nieces, and so I had a fun time this afternoon hanging out with family. And now here I am with you. So
All right.
how about you? How'd you fare?
Well, we were pretty similar. Again, this wasn't as bad as 2 years ago. However, um, 2 years ago it was awful. Like
Because the
everything was
whole
shut down,
state was
and we
like,
had and we had every bit of snow, ice, just every bit of the worst of winter weather conditions was here.
wow,
So, of course, in anticipation of this, I had gone out and done a bunch of extra shopping and trying to be prepared for in the event that something happens.
right,
And so yeah, Wednesday night, we were here and just kind of I was making sure everything was going to be okay, and that we were going to be ready for whatever. Hadn't lost power or anything at that point, but and in preparation for it, I had already like packed up a bunch of things because I figured if we lost power, the best thing to do would be obviously to go and be with family in case something happens and whatever else.
right.
So you know Thursday morning we were having the flickering intermittent power, and I mean early Thursday morning, like I was probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. So since I was up and kind of mildly panicked, I will say, I started I started putting stuff into the car, move my car closer and all that kind of stuff and put things in there. And then yeah, finally we did lose power, but I'm not sure exactly for how long it was because the moment that the power went out, like it didn't take long at all for temperatures to really start to drop indoors with absolutely no power.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I was, worried about, not just myself, but also my kid. She's very little, and kids don't
Yeah.
do well with that kind of stuff. So I was like, nope, let's go. And we packed it up and hightailed it over to my sister's house before the weather got too bad, before the roads were too bad. It was still
Oh,
very
good.
cold and it was rainy, but it was definitely manageable, drivable.
Good.
Got to their house, unpacked everything. Everything was fine, and then they lost power. And then so now we were all in their house and
Looking at each
without
other.
power. Yeah, and it was the same thing. Like we were talking about how eerie it was without power because like there was no background hum of anything. I mean, there was just nothing.
Which applies to this episode, by the way, as you say that.
Yes, yes, it does. So then, of course, we're stuck and we're trying to find things to do and breaking out games and all that other kind of stuff, and also trying to stay warm. So it meant everybody always in the same room all the
Mhm,
time. So it was me,
mhm.
my daughter, my sister and brother-in-law, and their two children. So you're looking at what is that? Three adults and yeah, three
3
children.
kids.
So
Yeah.
and a dog and so we made it work, but then the worst part about it was just like we could hear the trees popping and limbs falling and all that stuff, and the ice was everywhere. And so then we basically were stuck in the neighborhood. We couldn't leave. And uh, I was calling my neighbors and talking with people to see if they had lost power. And a lot of people have lost power over here. So I was like comfortable in that knowledge that yes, we had all lost power. I hadn't been too doomsday preppy, I guess. I don't know how think about it, whatever. But then power came back on here at my place before it did at my sister's place. But it was like at night, like it came on at like 7 o'clock at night. And so but they still didn't have power. And so then Friday morning, power came back on at their place at like 1 in the morning, something like that. And
Mhm.
with kids love flicking switches and everything else. So that's how we knew because the kids had at some point during the day had flicked every switch in the house. So then
Right.
suddenly it was just like you go from dead silence to everything on all at once across the whole
Yeah.
house, right?
Right,
And so
yeah,
it was just kind of it was very surprising and then very loud. And so then we had
yeah.
to deal with that. And then we were still stuck because of all the trees that had gone down. We couldn't get out of the neighborhood. So
Ah,
we were still stuck at my sister's house until about 7 ish, 6:30, 7 ish in the
right.
morning, Saturday.
Wow.
Not Saturday, Friday.
Friday.
And so, then they cleared out enough so that you can get out of the neighborhood. And then the roads were clear enough. And so I went home. We came back home and I went back to work. And so I was
Right.
working Friday morning. I probably could have been like, let's not work due to stress or whatever, but I'd already missed Thursday, obviously, because there was no power and couldn't work and whatever else. So then I was like, nah, we'll go ahead and work. But the kids, of course, have been out of school since Wednesday. They've loved well, yeah, since Tuesday. They went to school on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, and then we're out Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So they've just been loving this impromptu break that they've
Yeah,
got. But
yeah.
yeah, so I'm glad that it wasn't as bad as last time. But other than that, I mean we made it through. It was fine being with family and everything else. Um yeah, we're okay. I guess
Good.
that's the end of it is we're okay. We have power now. We're not one of those many people that still does not have power. I do feel really bad for them. Hopefully, nobody is in any kind of life-threatening situation, and they can wait until services get out to be restored to their
Yeah.
locations. We certainly don't want anybody to be stuck or hurt or stranded or anything like that. And that's why I was saying it was so hard on Twitter, to try to like stay in the mode of just talking about Star Trek stuff or sci-fi stuff because everywhere, everything was all winter storm and Austin Energy failure this and Austin Energy failure that, and recall the senator, recall the mayor, recall the like all of that was everywhere. I was just like, I don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I hear
but
you
it's hard
there.
sometimes. I do have a little bit of a political bent sometimes, and so I do want to kind of like dive into it a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, when it's just a bunch of name calling and well, so and so did this and it's their fault. Yeah, I lose patience really quickly on stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah, I hear you there.
but yeah, quickly, real quickly, in other news. I mean, since I keep talking about it at different points, I did end up finally changing gyms
Hmm.
for those of you who care. I know I've kind of chronicled this very long journey to physical fitness and health and whatever else here. I had been going to a Planet Fitness not too far away from me. We ran into some issues fairly recently, particularly regarding my kid. I had been taking her with me to the gym early in the morning. There's no one there, just kind of going and getting it done because I can't leave her at home. I can't do it.
Right.
Um, didn't seem to be a problem till one day I brought her, and again, we were always going in the morning, and then
Right.
one day my schedule changed just for that day, and I had to bring her with me in the evening. And
Right.
when I tried to bring her in with me that evening, they were like, "No, not allowed." Now, whether this was in their, guidelines, whatever, when I first signed up, I can't say. I honestly, I didn't really pay attention to any of that. I didn't think about it, and that's my fault because I'm obviously the parent. I should have looked into what was allowed for kids and whatever else. But
Right.
at the same time, I will say, I mean, I had been taking her with me for several weeks at this point. Like, and
Right.
no one had said anything. So if there was an issue, I feel like somebody, and there's always somebody on staff there. So if it was an issue, somebody could have come up to me and just been like, hey, we don't allow kids under a certain age,
Right.
whatever, and we could have
Right.
dealt with that then. Not a month and a half in, and now all of a sudden it's an issue.
Right. Right.
So went from there. I went today and had been going around to different gyms, checking stuff out and whatever else. I think I have found a new one, and I actually have signed up for a trial run. It's kind of like an anytime fitness in the sense that one, it's open 24 hours, but there's not necessarily a person there that's on staff every day. It's a secure building, so you have to have one of the little key fobs
Mm.
to scan
Get
in
in.
and use the equipment and everything. But I like it because it's way more open and you don't have so many like guided or machine lifts. And if you're a person who lifts, you know what that means. It's especially those machines are not machines, but like weightlifting stations, like for example, a squat rack where it's got the bar already locked in place, and you step into the rack basically, and you've got the bar behind you getting ready to do the workout, but there's these two other safety bars, I guess, that are there that keep you from being able to like go too far forward or too far back or anything like that. Some people like them because it adds a level of stability. I don't like them because I'm a very large man and they're never built for a person of my size. So
Yeah.
I'm always it's really close and squeezed in there versus a more open style that I was used to and trained on that gives me the freedom to really adjust the bar for my
Whatever purpose you have.
shoulders
Yeah.
and right. So that's going to be all this week. I actually start my trial run tomorrow. If all goes well with them, then that will be my new gym. Hopefully, I can have some greater success there.
Gotcha. Before we do anything else, how far are you in the expanse right now in that third book?
So
Are you good?
I have not progressed any further than where I was
Okay.
before. I have been trying, but hopefully between um, I'm really trying to like clear my slate for this week to dedicate more time to reading it and finishing it. That's the
Right.
goal, is to be finished, not just halfway through or more than halfway or whatever. I want to be finished.
Right.
So it's a lot. It'll be a lot of reading for sure to get that
Right.
done because I hadn't quite reached the halfway point, if you remember the last time we talked about it.
Right.
But yeah, I plan to do what I did last time and kind of like separate out from a lot of other things that I was doing, and just between work and workouts, the only other thing I'm going to be doing is reading that book. So we're gonna get it done. Gonna
Gotcha.
get it
All
done,
right.
and then we can
Last weekend,
schedule
my
our next. Go
next we
ahead.
can talk after dark. We can talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My uncle was in town last week, and we ended up talking about it. And he said I think he's been reading. He's read up through the third book, like he on his own. They were just like, "Oh yeah, I'm talking about it, reading it. We talk about it on After Dark." And he was like, "Yeah, I've like read up through book three or something." I think that's what he said. I don't think he'd watched the show yet. Um,
Okay.
no, he has watched the show. That was what we also discussed. But yeah, so he's also read some of the books too, which is I thought cool. I was like, yeah, small world.
Don't worry, we are definitely coming up on a another time we can do a deep dive on not just the third book, but the series so far overall. And I really can't wait to get into discussions after we finish the book series about where we think the show should go once they figure this out and come back. Because I mean, it's such a great show for them to not really come back and finish it makes no sense to me.
I
So,
know.
and there's so much stuff online about if it's going to come back, if another network's going to pick it up, or whatever. No, nothing official yet, nothing greenlit yet. We'll just suffice that to say right now, but still, it's great to speculate. So, and there are
Yeah.
so many great things there. But now that we're almost 20 minutes into our own show and we haven't said a word about the show that we're actually here to speak about, we will now turn our attentions to season 3, episode 22, Explorers.
Yep.
Now, would you like to give the recap this week, or would you like me to do it?
Oh, I can do it. These are last two double episodes. So
Mhm.
again, this episode is called Explorers. Um, there's basically two storylines going on. The main one is that Cisco comes back from having been on Bajor briefly, and has decided to grow a goatee, which I have to say that Perry, you are currently rocking quite as well. Lovely to look at, lovely to see. Anyway, and he tells his son Jake that he wants to build a Bajoran space vessel, a spacefaring vessel from 800 years ago. And Jake points out and is incredulous that, wait, you're telling me that when humanity was still sailing the oceans, the Bajorans were already exploring the skies, exploring space? And Cisco says yes, and it shows in the designs. It's a ship that is going to use basically light, so sails that catch light to move the
Mhm.
ship. He decides he wants to build it himself. He wants to build it in basically one of the empty hangars and do it by hand with tools from the age and no replication, none of that. He does it himself and he builds it. He builds this ship. He wants Jake to come along. Jake initially says, I'm waiting for a girl to come back to the station around the time you'd want to go on your trip. And so Cisco is a little disappointed, but then Jake does decide to go. And on the trip, Jake reveals to his dad that he's been writing, he's been hiding a tablet basically every time Cisco walks into a room, and he shows him the tablet and shows him that he's been writing fiction. And Cisco reads it, and he's a little not quite like most enthusiastic, like, oh, it was amazing. It was more like he says, you have some promise. This is promising. And Jake says, well, it's interesting because he has been accepted to a university back on Earth in New Zealand, a
Mhm.
writing scholarship. But he doesn't have to accept it for a full year. He could wait a year to make a decision, and he still thinks he wants to wait. He doesn't necessarily feel quite ready to go, and he has time to make up his mind for up to a year. Now Cisco is like, oh well, don't make this, take your opportunities when you can. And Jake is like, well, I don't want to leave you alone. And Cisco's like, well, don't make the decisions about your life based on me. Do you? Jake is like, well, I got a girl in mind for you. I think there's someone you should be, having you haven't dated in at least a year. So they're bonding, father son time.
Yes.
Now before Cisco left on this trip, Gul Dukat contacted him and said, um, yeah, these Bajorans fairy tales about spacefaring vessels that somehow reached Cardassia 800 years ago. Don't believe your lying eyes. That's not true. And Cisco's
Yeah.
like, well, hey, we're gonna go for it anyway. Ducat is like, hey, this is gonna be super dangerous. You probably shouldn't do this. Um, but the Cisco's do it anyway. And it turns out that yes, this trip is dangerous. So while they're going at sublight speeds, which means that a runabout could come get them in about an hour if they have trouble. At one point, they somehow catch some sort of wave, and they actually end up much further away from where they expected to be, and they can't get a hold of the station, and they're effectively lost, and they're some of the sails have been torn off, and their instruments, these ancient instruments, have been destroyed because they fell down and broke. So they're lost, they're in trouble, and who shows up but Gul Dukat and the Cardassians, welcoming them to Cardassia. Apparently, this wave caught them and pushed them all the way to Cardassia. And Gul
Mhm.
Dukat has a statement from the Cardassian government saying, "Oh, this is wonderful that you discovered that you could do this, because we just so happened to find a crash site of a Bajoran ship just like the one you're on, and
What
this
a
is wonderful.
coincidence.
Yeah, yeah." And they shoot off some fireworks, which is hilarious because it's only the
Space
Cisco's.
fireworks, right?
Yeah, it's Cisco and the Cardassians having a firework party, which was just hilarious. And then the other storyline is that Dr. Bashir, back on the station, has become aware that he was not valedictorian at in school, at his medical school. It was someone else who won valedictorian because Bashir missed the one question on the.
Postganglionic fiber for a preganglionic nerve
There we
on their
go.
final exam, and he was salutatorian because of it.
Exactly. And so he wants to make himself extremely presentable, well put together for the woman who actually did win valedictorian, because her ship, the Wellington, I believe, is docking with the station. And so he wants to meet her and make sure that he's not just second best. Because the thing is that the position on the Wellington was the preferred position for everyone if they could, win the spot. And she, as valedictorian, got the spot. But he didn't want that position. He wanted to be on
That's right.
beige on Deep Space Nine. But he feels like she could have taken from him his position here on the station, and so he basically wants to just know and feel confident he wasn't second best, that he's not second to anybody, which, I mean, frankly, he literally was. So I think that's a little funny he's arguing that. But anyway, point being is that he wants to meet her, talk to her, and and prove to himself that he's not a failure. But she doesn't recognize him. In fact, the first time he tries to go up to her, she walks right past him, and he's like, "Oh my god!" Like, she not only is better than me, but she's like won't even recognize me, won't talk to me. So he gets drunk with O'Brien, and O'Brien and him talk about the fact that O'Brien doesn't hate him anymore, but um, Bashir wants to go confront her and like demand an explanation, but O'Brien talks him down. He's too drunk. So the next day, Bashir goes and actually goes up to her, introduces himself, and she reveals that she didn't know who he was. So that's why she didn't recognize him earlier.
She thought he
And
was an Andorian.
exactly. And that she actually does follow his work, that her position on the Wellington is actually kind of boring. They just go around charting star systems as opposed to actually doing anything that she might be interested in. And she's actually kind of jealous of his position he's been doing. And he invites her to come back to his infirmary, excuse me, and take a look at some of his results. So yeah, fairly simple episode. I might have gone a little more detailed than necessary, but that is the gist of everything that happens.
That's right. And again, you can always go and watch the episode to get the full details, and then you can come back and listen to us. Unless you're watching us live, which in that case, no, you can't. You'll just have to go back later on, and you can see if we were right. And of course, we're going to do our own little deep dive here on certain points that we find particularly significant. So tune in for that because it's the fun part.
Yeah.
Um, so first and foremost, I just want to say, of course, I love this episode because we get to feature our favorite space family, the Ciscos, and we talk about them. We don't really get to see them together a whole lot. In fact, this is the first time that we've seen Jake really in a string of episodes.
Yeah.
The
Wow.
past, like I guess 4 or 5, we haven't really seen Jake at all. So now we're getting to check in with him and see what's going on. We know he's still dating Leanne because that's the reference of the girl he's going to meet when Ben finishes building the ship. That's why Jake wouldn't be available because Leanne would be arriving and they haven't seen each other in a while and he wants to spend time with her and so forth. And we're also seeing the evolution of that father-son relationship. Much of what we had seen before this moment was, Jake was obviously much younger, and the station was also a very new area to them. They hadn't quite settled into it. Now it's very much a home for the both of them. Jake is older. Jake is doing well in school. Looks like he's getting ready to go off to what could be seen as the equivalent of college here. He's been accepted into a very prestigious writing academy back on Earth, and he's got a year basically that he can defer and still go.
Mhm.
So yeah, it sounds like he's preparing for his college time, you know,
Yeah.
and he's worried about his aging father, who is obviously showing no signs of slowing down here. The man just built a whole spacecraft from scratch
Yes. In
while
his
in
spare
command.
time. Yeah.
Right, that's what I couldn't believe it when they were just showing everything. I was like, "What?" He's like, "Well, I'm gonna do this in my spare time." I'm like, of course we're seeing this as a montage in the episode,
Right.
but I'm wondering how long did this really take? Like, was this months of him planning and putting
Right.
together? Because you have other duties. You are the
Right.
station commander. There has got to be other things you could be doing with that downtime. Or do
I
you
was
just delegate and like, hey,
yeah.
I'm blocking off this, next 4 days to build, only bother me in an emergency type
Yeah.
situation.
Well, when we laugh about that in particular was the whole goatee thing because, like, he didn't have a goatee in any of the previous episodes, so we couldn't in any way insinuate that maybe he has been doing this for a while and we're just now catching up on it. Nope, he got the goatee in this episode. He had it while he was building the ship, and
Well,
unless he did it, yeah, within that quick time frame of like 4 or 5 days, it would seem like it would have taken quite some time.
so
So,
this is always my main objection to my main complaint against Star Trek, not objection, complaint. They don't handle the passage of time well, and I kind of get it because they're trying to fit a lot into an hour time span for entertainment. But if they just gave us something that showed that a lot of time had passed, even between episodes, like we have no way of knowing how soon this takes place after the events of the last episode.
which,
We
if we
know
want
that
to remind everyone, was a big episode because
it
they were
was.
having the whole, like, basically war over the Gamma Quadrant, and now we're sailing a ship for fun.
Right. Right. And I mean, and not only that, but we know that Cisco has been gone for a while. When the episode starts, he's just coming home from having been away on Bajor doing some, research
Yes,
study about Bajoran culture. And
right,
that's where he grew the goatee. So he
right,
hasn't been home. He hasn't been on the station in a while already. So
right,
so you could say he took a vacation, right? And
right,
and based on the amount of growth that he's got in his face, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm 100% an expert here. Everybody's hair grows in different whatevers,
right.
but if we want to assume that from the last episode to now, that let's say that immediately upon rescuing Odo and Garrick from the Gamma Quadrant, he came home, he debriefed, and he said, "That's it. I'm on vacation. I'll be back. Whatever." Right? And then this is his first time being back from that. That means that if he stopped shaving that day, it has been at least 3 weeks
I know.
for the amount of growth that he's had. So he's been
Yeah,
gone all this time because
right,
Jake was surprised by the goatee. That means he hasn't seen his father this
right,
entire time.
right.
So yeah, he's been gone for at least 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. Because it's like it's there, it's solid,
It's
it's
full. Yeah,
trimmed,
yeah,
right? So he's had this for a while and been taking care of it for a while.
right,
So yeah, he's got a good solid goatee going
yeah,
there when he shows up,
right.
and then he immediately launches into yet another project. Oh, I'm back from vacation, but not really. Kira, you're still running things
Yeah,
in my spare time, which means I'm only going to be in my office from like what 8 to noon, and then after that, all the rest of my day is spent building. Crazy the amount of delegation powers that man
right,
has to put
yeah.
together a whole spacefaring vessel by himself. All
I
right,
know.
by himself.
I mean, I just love the idea of that too. Is like when we think about the complexity of, like, just being airtight, for example, like, so it doesn't just vent into space immediately. Like, yeah, one man all by himself. I mean, dear good. I mean, like, these plans must be very well articulated. What's happening
Right.
and how to do it.
That- and that's the other part about Star Trek that you can complain about too. Like everybody seems to have this extraordinary level of technical and scientific skill because all of the things that they do are just so elaborate. Like if you think about that in today's uh, equivalent, right?
Hmm.
Try to think of one man building a spaceship and having it ready. Like, what do you think that that would take to make it space worthy for one man? There's
Right.
no way he's doing that. Yeah, at all, really. But even if it was somehow conceivable, it would take several years for
Right.
that to be accomplished. This man does it in a month. That's kind of how it feels. Like this is a
Right.
month. This is a month project, and he
Right.
just knocked it out. In addition to all of his other duties, so not that hard,
Right.
not that complicated.
Right.
So I just assume that they make you assume that either everybody is extraordinarily talented and brilliant and skillful, or there is a lot of prefab technology where you can just go places and have certain things like printed out, like the very elaborate 3D printers, and just he's just kind of laying it down. Like the schematics are telling you you need this part that is this size, that is, this thickness, and he's going to the replicator and programming it in, pulling it out, and then he's just welding it together.
Right.
Because that's about the only way that would make any sense in my mind. But I
Right.
mean, who knows? But it was still extraordinary to do, and I did enjoy seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you just take the grain of salt and say yes, the plans make sense, and Cisco, being the go getter he is, goes for it. Okay. All right. We have an episode. Um, Go forward. Um, it was quite interesting though. It feels like quite the you again in the last two episodes we had the build up of this major conflict. Cardassia, Romulans, the
Mhm.
Dominion. We had the Defiant going out there. We had the security officer planting something to all kinds of drama. And then this one, it's father son going on a little sailing
Maybe,
trip, and Bashir meeting his old colleague. It's like whiplash almost.
yeah, maybe everybody was just burnt out. Maybe they just needed a moment to reset or something. I don't
Right.
know. Um, but I like this episode not just for that, but I mean it also highlights something that was very rare to be seen on television at all, and especially during the '90s. And this is the the focusing on that single parent relationship, and in particular, it's the single father with the son and raising them and moving them into adulthood and so forth. Very rare to see, and especially during the '90s, where there was any number of family oriented TV shows. It's not to say that there weren't. I mean, Full House was very much in its heyday. You had The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, Family Matters. I mean, just name it. There were a lot of different family oriented shows back then, but they typically featured full families, right? Mother, father, multiple kids. There were uncles. There were, all of these various dynamics in those shows. But to see one where it was just again the singular parent with the one child and that being their focus didn't happen.
Right.
Then of course the fact that it's a black family featured so prominently as well was another just huge thing for TV. And I really love what we see here in Ben Cisco's parenting style. His son has come to him and he's clearly at a crossroads as to what he wants to do, and
Right.
he's coming to his father obviously to get advice and approval. And Cisco doesn't, he's not authoritative with his son. He doesn't overrule him. He listens to him. He reads the work that Jake has, written here, and is really helping Jake guide him to make the decision himself.
Right.
He's not trying to tell him you will do this thing, or you won't do this thing. It could have very easily fallen into that trope of I'm your father. I was in the military. You're going to be in the military too. I was in Starfleet. You're going to be in Starfleet. We
Yeah.
never see any of that. He listens to Jake. They communicate very well. He's very open with his son, and his son is receptive and open and kind.
Right.
And, you get the sense that they not only communicate well, but they understand each other. And
Right.
there's no sense of, I guess, antagonism or fear between the two of them. And I like that. Like I like that the hesitancy that Jake had with telling his father, about the Pennington School and everything else was less about his father being disappointed in him and more about I don't want to leave you because I don't want you to be lonely. Like I just really enjoyed that. Like he's and that's
Yeah.
why he's like I don't want to tell you this because I don't want you to be sad because I don't want you to think I'm leaving you. I really did enjoy all of that. And then of course the relationship talk was also quite funny, and I enjoyed
Yeah.
that as well.
Well, we have to quickly point out that yeah, unfortunately, Cisco is a little bit. Well, he says, well, I could have dinner with Bashir or Dax or even Quark. He's like,
Yeah.
wow, scrapping the bottom of that barrel, aren't you,
Right,
Cisco?
right. Oh, Quark's on the table. Oh, no.
uh, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, it is interesting. So remind me, what is the last date woman that Cisco saw? Do you
It
remember?
would have been, um, what was her name? Fenna. Fenna is the last woman that we see him with,
Was
at
she the
least
one with the
in this universe. Remember, Fenna's the woman who she can astral project. She's got
That's what
that
I thought.
other version of
Yes.
herself, and the real version of
That
her
was
name is
season
named.
1, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that season 1? Man,
yeah.
okay,
And
when
so
Jake said it's been at least a year, I was like, "Is it season 2 that I'm trying to remember something
no,
from?"
you're
But
trying to remember
no.
season one.
Man,
Because yeah, her real name was Nadell, but she was married to Gideon Sayatek,
that
and then her
scientist
astral
guy, he was
projection, right, was
yeah,
Fenna
yeah.
in the
Yes.
red thing.
Very
Yeah,
lovely, lovely Finna.
yes, played by Sally Richardson Woodfield. So
Oh, man.
anyway, anyway, she was on another show that I also enjoyed a whole lot called Eureka, and she was fantastic on
I
that
just
show
wanna
as well.
quickly point out, it was only a few episodes ago that, again, Cisco was dragged to the mirror universe and met his
See,
wife and didn't tell you to Jake, "Jake, I met your mother. We can
well,
go see
think
your
about
mother
it.
anytime you want."
Well, think about it. Why would he tell Jake that? I mean,
I
she's
know,
not
I
really his mom, and then she
I
couldn't
know.
necessarily come back with him, and that would have been a whole
I
other
No, that was the problem we
traumatic
discussed in that
event.
episode. Is like it didn't make sense how easy or difficult it seemed to be to go from one universe to the other. Like, why couldn't they just bring all the poor humans from that mirror universe to our universe and make an escape from all the terror? Whatever.
Right. Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, Fenn is the last person that we see Cisco with in our universe. We know in the mirror universe he gets with both Dax and the intendant Kira. But when it comes to officially pursuing a relationship, being interested in anyone, going on a date, then yes, it would have been Fenna slash Nadell from
Right.
season one. So Jake is correct. It's been a while. Seems like Cisco is obviously diving deep into other interests, hobbies to keep himself busy.
Oh well,
Um,
yeah, it's a good point.
he's
Actually, he is lonely. Poor man built a dang spaceship in his
built
spare
a whole
time.
space. Right, right, right. He's got so much free time.
Get
The
him
man
to
took
dinner
a
with Quark's stat. Like this man is
yeah.
desperate.
So yeah, I mean Jake is 100% correct, and
Yeah,
he's already figured out the person that his dad needs to date. He's got a
yeah.
hot freighter captain
Yeah. Cisco's
that
like, "Oh
he's
my gosh,
eager for him to meet.
my own son's giving me the relationship advice. What?"
It's a great little role reversal and very nice family moment between the two of them to be able to speak in such a way, and he's talking about his father not from the standpoint of um, you need to get laid, dad, or whatever, right? He's saying, I I recognize that you're lonely and that you need companionship, and I don't want to, be worried about you while I'm all the way back on Earth doing whatever. You should meet someone. You should get out. You should, besides relying on Dax and Bashir and everybody for entertainment, you need to have someone for you.
Right.
So we get to, at least see the seeds of that being laid here between father and son. And who knows, maybe that's why we won't see Jake in a while because he'll be off at school or something. And maybe this freighter captain will turn out to be worth it in some regard. So I would kind of like to see a return of the or not necessarily a total return, but of him like maybe trying to date or attempting to date. Like he's got like different women that he's kind of, interested in or whatever. We haven't really seen anything like that except for well, obviously Kirk was the infamous they try to make him seem like a womanizer. And then, with Next Generation, is it's Riker, and then Geordi is the one with all the failed dating attempts. So to kind of see a balance of
Yeah,
some of
Jordy
this
was
would
always
have been
trying too
interesting.
hard. That was his problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I have to
So
say, just quickly on that scientist, the woman who designed the Enterprise, like that whole like saga of him like making the holodeck version of her, and she being upset about it when she finds out, and then she's actually married. Oh, it's like, man, no, it was perfect for Jordy. Why did she have to be married? No. Uh, oh well.
that's an episode that always kind of weirds me out because like both of them
Yeah.
because he created someone who was real, who really existed. He created that person in the
Right.
holodeck,
Right.
and granted, they
And that
never.
version fell in love with him by the end of the episode,
Right. So it
which
and it
is
and
like,
it was
yeah,
supposedly based off of her personality that the computer could cobble together. So it makes you
97%
think.
effective. Yeah.
Right. So it makes you think that if the real her was ever to come around, then they would be able to hit it off. And then of course we see that the real her does show up and it's anything but.
Yeah.
And then, when she's finds herself in the holodeck, um, and she's outraged by it. And Jordy gives this speech about offering her friendship and whatever else. And I have to say, even though this show is not our show is not about Next Generation, in that moment, I still feel like Jordy was wrong.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing he
You
should
definitely
have
feel
done,
that way.
yeah, the thing he should have done after solving the problem for the Enterprise was delete that program, or at least
Yeah.
delete that part of the program, the
Right.
holographic
Yeah.
woman part.
Back
He
it
should
up.
have deleted that.
Back it up
Yeah,
to like she's just the technical part of, yeah.
yeah,
She's just the engineer. No other personality outside of that. You
yeah.
just need the woman's knowledge, not her
Yeah, him
affection.
keeping that around and it being so very personal.
There are so many
Um,
questions about the Hollow Deck. I mean,
yeah,
obviously the Hollow Suites with Quark answers those questions for us, but on TNG you get this weird version of like, how creepy is it? They don't seem willing to answer that question in
right.
full.
And yeah, they really don't, and they kind of in a way they kind of serve it as everybody here is so evolved and high-minded that technology like the holodeck would never be abused or misused or whatever. But I think we can all agree that no matter how high-minded a person may be, people together communally, there will be someone in there who will abuse certain technologies. That's just a
Right.
given. That there'll be somebody who does it the way that they're not supposed to. So yeah, the fact that there's not more safeguards, especially on creating people who actually exist. It's one thing to, I suppose, like create your own image of somebody, right?
Yeah,
A,
that's an
a
interesting point.
unique,
Yeah.
a unique original image of someone. But to be like, let me scan this picture and make this person, and then I get to do whatever I want to. Yeah, yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
that's got to be wrong. You know,
Yeah.
that's like the equivalent of you getting your like your girlfriend's pictures and using them in a manner unbecoming there,
Thank you for
or not
taking
your
us to that.
girlfriend. Hey, I try to make these things relatable. Or maybe taking not necessarily your girlfriend's pictures, but like your girlfriend's friend's pictures. Somebody that you have just a very tangential friendly association with, and you've now taken that and made it something worse. That would be the equivalent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah. But
getting off this topic.
yeah, there wasn't even a hollow suite on the hollow deck, suite or deck on this episode. But
No,
actually, we can talk about Cork real fast. It was Cork had a bet with Morn that Bashir. Bourne said that Bashir would awkwardly go meet with the other,
Elizabeth Lenz, that's her name from the
right,
Wellington.
the valedictorian, and that things would go be awkward and things would work out. He'd walk away, but uh, Quark, being the optimist that he is, and of course the better that he is, thinks that Bashir's charm will win out, and they'll something will happen, and that's exactly right. Bashir is initially, upset, gets himself drunk by the fact that he didn't get the reaction he wanted from her, but when he actually does finally get the stones to go up and introduce himself, She turns out to be lovely, a nice person, someone that he can relate with, and she's open and vulnerable with him. Like, yeah, I actually envy you. She says you actually have the
Mhm.
better position. Things that worked out better for you, in I think the long run, which is part of me is like, ah, great. Now you just bolstered Bashir's ego again. Thanks. Like he was feeling a little, vulnerable and self-conscious about, oh, my second rate. And of course he got second place. I mean, I get it. You're very competitive. I mean, super competitive. I mean, to be honest. But anyway, it would have been nice almost to let him have that moment of like, yeah, no, the Wellington was a great job. And
The
but
Lexington,
yeah,
we should say. I
oh, I'm
just
sorry.
we
I
we
keep saying
we
it
we
wrong.
both did it. You said the Wellington, and I didn't correct you, and then I said it, but it's actually the Lexington is the ship that she's
Got it. Yeah, yeah, it was like I like the idea that Bashir chose right. Like he even before, like I even like the idea that he even failed that particular question in order that he wouldn't have to go on the Lexington. And he's kind of been not quite sure with himself, like why, like because only a few episodes ago when he was in that mind space, the like that evil creature was like acting as his like conscious or whatever,
the
like
the
that devil on his
Lethian.
shoulder saying
Yeah.
like, yeah, you intentionally failed because you're just a failure at heart, like you can't handle success. No, what if it actually was that like he didn't want that job, and he wanted to go to D Space Nine, he wanted that position, he didn't want to have to turn down the big job. So this was his way of weaseling into, like, not say weaseling, but like working it out in his favor that he got the job he actually wanted. I almost thought that was
That's a
going to be
good
the
point.
explanation, but they
That was
didn't
a good
ever do
that's a
it.
good point because they do say that, like that was part of his fear of her because as valedictorian, it wasn't that she was immediately granted the assignment, but as
Right,
valedictorian, she had the choice of any assignment. But the
right,
top one that everybody wanted was the posting to the Lexington, not
right,
necessarily going into the frontier as Bashir called it, but he wanted the Deep Space Nine position. So
right,
yes, by again, like what we learned from that Lethian that was in his brain was that yeah, he intentionally failed, and so maybe that's why he did it because since everyone wanted that posting. If he had become valedictorian and then he suddenly turned it down and went to
right,
something else, it probably would have cast a pall over him and what was
right,
going on and why he did it. So by
right.
not being valedictorian, that pressure was off of him. But at the
Yes,
same time, now he's introduced a new level of inadequacy to himself
right,
because she, as valedictorian, had the ability to take away the
right,
assignment he really wanted. So it's a
right.
weird gamble that he made. I don't
Yeah,
want to be valedictorian because I don't want to choose this path that everybody else wants. I want this other thing. But
right,
by giving up the way to guarantee the spot, he
right,
jeopardized not getting it. Because what if she had the
right.
same feeling? What if she didn't
Exactly.
want it either, and then suddenly she took it away?
And then it
So he would have been
also
screwed.
it and they could also put that fear in his mind that I can't handle success. I couldn't handle
Hmm.
the pressure of having, if I had been valedictorian, to choose which path to go down, and sort of making a choice, I basically threw the choice away. Like, all of that would have been tied together nicely. So I'm a little sad that the episode didn't actually insinuate that, like didn't go that route, or at least present it to us. But maybe that's better for us because then we can talk about it and propose maybe that's what was going on. We as viewers can
Hmm.
give our own theories.
I
Um,
do like that. I do like because I mean it makes to me it adds a level of complexity to Bashir that we really hadn't seen before. Him kind of being this person who was struggling with this decision,
mhm,
and then the fear how that manifested later on in his life to the point where now he can't even speak to her. Like he worked himself up to at least stand up to introduce himself, and then she just walked right by and he did nothing to call out to her, to
right,
signal, to do anything because he's in his own mind, he's built her up as this person who could take this thing away from him, even though they both now have clearly their own respective assignments. Like there's
right,
no she's not gonna suddenly show up and be like, never mind, I want this, you gotta go. That's not gonna happen. And then,
Right.
yeah, when they do finally sit down and talk, and she talks about how much she envies his ability to stick with a project and
Long
work through it.
term,
And
yes.
he's
Yeah.
got all this research and he's doing all these wonderful, amazing things that she is unable to do because they system hop all the time.
Right.
They're in one system for a few weeks, collect some samples, and before she has a chance to really get into any kind of research, they're off to the next space. And she's got to
Right.
do some more sample gathering and cataloging, and they ship everything to other people. And she's not really doing any of the research. She's just
Right.
doing the basically the safety gathering of it.
Right.
She's the medical doctor to make sure that no one else is necessarily getting sick or whatever while they're doing these things. She doesn't get to do what he's doing.
Right.
So, and now she's getting a chance, they get to share and now he makes a friend out of it. He's got this person
Right.
now that he can share ideas with. So yeah, great turn on their relationship development and on the development of Bashir
Right.
altogether.
And I quickly want to just point out that this does remind me of Keiko O'Brien, because
Mhm.
she was in a similar position to Bashir in the sense that, well, I can't go off on the ships going around, exploring all the kinds of things. But she could have stayed on the station, and I think it was the first episode. O'Brien proposes to her like, you could be the head botanist or whatever. I don't know if that was just my idea of what she should have done or if they actually did propose it. I forget now. But anyway, you could be head botanist here on Deep Space Nine, and like all of the various wonderful things they find in the Gamma Quadrant, they could bring here, and you could help catalog it all. I don't know. Part of me
Yeah,
thinks
that
that
I mean,
I wish she kind of had done that. Maybe that could have been something she could have done. But
and actually, I agree. I think that that's what she should have done. I mean, they didn't have um, a biology, a botanist department, or anything like that on the station. And with them bringing back samples and stuff from the Gamma Quadrant, she could have been at the forefront of doing the research to not just catalog all of those various plant life forms and things that they find, but also cross-referencing and researching and how are they useful, if useful at all, or what they can learn from them, and like just so many different areas of research that
right,
she could have spearheaded because she would have been the first to receive all of those samples. And
right,
instead, yeah, I mean, on the Enterprise when they were there, she was, they were traveling around from area to area, and she was able to firsthand, pick whatever. But she
hmm,
didn't get to keep a lot of those things. They had an arboretum and they grew certain things, but I'm sure there were restrictions, there were limits to what she could do.
right,
Because again, she was on a spacefaring vessel, whereas a space station or a planet side research facility would have given her more time to spend because they're stationary.
right,
So yeah, I would have liked to have seen her take up that particular role as well, and see how that would have developed for the personal relationship of the O'Briens themselves, but then also just overall expanding the culture and stuff of Deep Space Nine.
right,
And she ends up kind of taking that position anyway when she goes to Bajor to head up that research that they were doing in that remote area of whatever province that was, I forget, when she's going to be there for months. So that's what she's doing. She's not
right,
just cataloging those species, she's doing all of the genomic research and,
right,
all of that kind of breaking them down and everything else. She's doing it anyway. She
right,
could have done that on the station,
right,
you know. But I'm sure they had other reasons for why they couldn't have Rosalind Child, the actress who plays Keiko, around. Maybe there was something, contractually why they couldn't do it or whatever. But in universe, it would have totally been possible, and I would have liked to see that too because Keiko really is a great character, and she gets way more hate than she deserves. And I'm going to say that every time we talk about her.
yeah. I think she's a great character too. Speaking of O'Brien, though, or the O'Briens, the getting drunk and singing songs about building Jerusalem in England was an interesting song to sing. Some sort of shanty, I guess. Um,
An old crusade uh, marching song or whatever it was that
Sounded
they were
like it,
singing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was amazing that it lasted. It come this all this way. And it sounded like O'Brien had just taught it to Bashir from the way they were
yeah,
describing it to each other.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, apparently this was real alcohol because at some point when Bashir is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go talk to her," O'Brien grabs the bottle and says, "I'm gonna get some synthale." Bashir's like, "No,
That's
no,
right.
don't do it," which is just great. Like, yeah, you can not get drunk in the future, but I mean, don't people drink primarily for the buzz? Like I don't drink
So
myself. It's like Not
So
often is
in
it for the taste for people, but
right.
whatever.
So I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people drink. But I'm just
Let
saying,
me
like,
list mine. Yeah.
no, right. My my first one is 7 and is in the next room. No, no. Um, I mean, obviously, we have people who drink for celebration, drink for depression.
Yes.
Again, we're just going to say there's a lot of reasons people drink. And in this episode, we're seeing him, both of them are drinking more to, commiserate over, I don't know, lost opportunities or whatever the heck it is that they're, drinking about. But as we see here in universe, we know that synthale is the stuff that basically gives you the same taste but none of the effect. So if you're
Surely
a
no
person,
hangover. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't stay in your system that way. You can get a little bit of a buzz off of it, but it's gone quickly. So
Right.
you would have to drink a whole lot of synthale in order to truly get as drunk as what they get. And
Right.
from the explanations that are given, if you go through the various shows or whatever, especially I know there's a couple episodes of Next Generation where they talk about it. Um, it's virtually impossible to get
Right.
drunk off of Cynthia. You can get a little buzz going, but basically the moment that you stand up from your chair, it's gone.
Right.
It's
Which
that
is
quick.
And that's also what happens here. Bashir's like, I'm
So
going to go confront her and demand an explanation. And O'Brien says, don't do it because you can barely stand
you
as
can
it
barely
is.
stand. So
um,
this would also have the added effect of if they always drank synthale, then the body's ability to handle and regulate alcohol would be drastically different for them versus
mm,
us because we don't have a synthale that we can drink that would
right.
have those kind of effects. So our bodies, to a certain degree, are used to processing alcohol. So you could like they look very, very drunk in this episode, right? When we see them, but we have no way of knowing exactly how much of that alcohol they consumed. For all we know, since it's real, legitimate liquor, that
And it went
one to
through him
two
like
glasses,
that.
yeah, one maybe two glasses tops, and they could be just completely obliterated here. We don't know. The bottle itself is old, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they cracked open a new bottle and have made their way all the way through it. It's an old bottle. He could have been holding that for how whoever knows how long, and just
Yeah.
occasionally pouring a glass every so often or whatever. So we don't know,
Yeah.
but we do know obviously that real alcohol still exists. They still make it. We know it's a Scotch whiskey that they're drinking. Um, so yeah, I mean,
Cole
I
maybe
like
is
that they
Scottish. Yeah.
Irish. He's Irish.
Irish. I was going to say, I thought he was Irish initially. And I was like,
Yeah,
well, if he's Scotch
he's
whiskey, eh.
Irish. But I mean, we can still have Scotch whiskey. I mean, we can get whiskey here, and I'm not Scottish or Irish or any of those things. I can still pick it up.
Oh, I know. I know.
Um,
I was just like, in the moment, I was like, wait a minute. Does that mean, am I remembering correctly that he's Irish? But anyway,
yeah.
keep going. Keep going.
I like that they used a human alcohol for it.
Yeah.
Nothing, no weird blue, green,
Oh,
red,
yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
They went old school, back to
Yeah.
earth,
Right.
and did it. Which would have
And we're
been
singing a
yeah,
song about England again, of all things.
yeah.
Um,
It's a great scene, great friendship scene for them
yeah.
because
Well,
up to this moment they had always been kind of antagonistic towards
that's
each other.
exactly what happens in this moment.
Yeah,
O'Brien says, "Look, there's only two responses people have to you: either they love you or they hate you." And I know because I used to hate you.
yeah. And he's like, "Oh, so now you're saying you love me?" And he's like, "No, I'm just saying I don't hate you anymore." It was a
Yeah,
great scene.
yeah.
Yeah,
And because they're drunk, it makes it even better because, like, I do not hate you anymore.
really, and that's from the heart. I do not hate you. It's
Yeah,
great.
it was funny. And it reminds me, just again, I talked about it before, but when I was in college and I was taking like the acting class, I've probably told this story before, but there was one day where I was supposed to do a part. We're doing it for class, and there was this part I had, and I was watching in my film class. Oh, what's the Rosebud movie? Citizen Kane.
Citizen
And
Kane.
in Citizen Kane, there's a scene where I think it's Citizen Kane or it's the main character. It might have been someone else too. Like at one, there's a scene where someone's drunk, and I was like, oh, I should use that to inform this character that I'm having to do for like the next day, literally. So I've been practicing the lines and practicing the part, been doing it with my partner, and then like basically right before class and we had to do the presentation, I did committed to this drunk role. And again, I don't drink. I've never been drunk, but I just went for it based on this version of the drunk character I saw. And the professor loved it, and I was like, I'm in this class just to like earn a credit. Like there were actually more serious like actors in the group, but he like paused the class and he was like, "That was great. That's exactly what I want." I'm like, I'm just one of the guys. Like I'm not supposed to be like stopping class for me. Don't stop class for me or anything. But I remember that being like the moment that really taught me like that's what makes acting acting is when you commit to a part and you just go for it. 'Cause that's what I did. It was fun to just go for it. And watching these guys pretend to be drunk, I was like, yeah, that's one way to. That's how I got to know how acting
Uh,
works. So it
I
was
was
fun to
gonna
see them
ask
do
you,
it
you
on
didn't.
screen.
I was gonna ask you, like, you didn't go full method and like just do like a shot or two
Exactly.
before
Yeah.
you go and go do your drunk scene, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Just for the experience, man. You gotta, you know, I'm I very much believe in having certain experiences just for the knowledge of them, which kind of relates to what we saw here with Ben and Jake Sisko, where
Right,
Ben was reading what Jake wrote, and he was told him, you're writing about some things that you haven't experienced yet.
right,
So he's talking about getting that kind of experience so that can inform his writing,
right,
and I think that can also apply to certain aspects of life. Like before we necessarily judge certain things,
mm,
that you should experience them. Now, of course. There's always going to be exceptions to that, caveats here and there. We don't need to experience certain things to know that they're dangerous, to know that they're harmful. We don't need that. Okay. I don't need to drop into a volcano to know that it's going to kill me if I do. Right. Like,
right.
obviously. But I'm just saying, like, certain things within limits, like for you, for example, I know that you say that you said that you don't drink, and that's perfectly fine. But I would
Right.
encourage at least one time in your life
Oh,
that
yeah,
you
I've done that. Yeah, yeah. There was
okay,
one time in particular where I was with friends. I was like, all right, I'll go for it while we're here,
okay,
and I just didn't care for it. I
okay,
mean, maybe I didn't.
hey,
I
no,
didn't. I didn't drink the
that's
right
fine.
thing. I'm sure, at the
Oh,
very
maybe
least.
yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe that's true because I can remember
yeah,
my first drinking experience and I didn't like it at all, but
yeah,
it was certainly about the taste of what I was drinking and it was
yeah. And
awful,
I dog
So,
sat for my parents' next door neighbor once, and he was like, "Let's have a glass of wine," and he just all right, I'll try it if it's any good. I just don't care for the smell of alcohol at the very least. I mean, again, I know that in some ways it's not the point. You
right,
do it anyway.
right. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, being now that we're sharing our drunk stories, I remember, in college and watching people who were first, having their first drinks and everything, and the ratio of Coke to alcohol was extraordinary, right? Like it would just be like watch them crack open a can of Coke, right? And then just they might as well have just sprinkled a little bit of alcohol on top of it because there was it was more soda than actual alcohol. And
Yeah.
then gradually over time, as they got used to things and whatever else, you watched as that
That
changed.
switched.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So and then you get to the point where you're not doing mixed drinks at all. So I remember watching that evolution of people, and having a bit of it myself. I was never really a fan of mixed drinks anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think that people should have certain experiences, and then afterwards, if you're like, yeah, you know what, I'm not a wine drinker, I've tried it and I don't like it, then I can accept that. I can't accept somebody who's like, I've never had it, I'm never gonna have it, and it's awful. It's like, well, how do you know it's awful? You've
Right.
never done it,
Right.
so like that kind of mentality on certain things bothers me. But
Right.
um but yeah, and again, that's just certain things. I'm not saying everybody has to go out and literally try everything to say that you don't like it or whatever it is. That's not it at all. Please don't do that.
Right.
But yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Now, of course, we can't close out this episode without talking about the one and only Gul Dukat, who comes in and he's just so insufferable. Of course he is. But it was great because he is so insufferable. So of
Yeah.
course, when we first see him, he's called Cisco because he's found out what Cisco is planning to do, and he is trying to gently discourage him from doing so. How could a man of such stature and science and rationality give himself over to myths
Bajoran
and
legends.
legends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're gonna risk your life for a Bajoran myth? Come on. Don't do that. And Cisco's like, why do you even care? Like, why are
Yeah.
you paying any attention to what we're doing over here? Like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And he's right. It's like, why are like because again, Ducat called him, not the
Yes.
other way around. So it's like,
Yeah.
why do you
He
care
wasn't saying,
so
"Hey,
much?
when you see this golden weird this space vessel enter your space, your Cardassian space, don't be worried or anything." Nope, other
Right.
way around. It was Ducat calling, which is again why when at the end of the episode
Oh yeah.
we found a
Great.
crash site.
Oh yeah, I love that too when he pops up and he's like, "Don't you know where you are?" No, I don't know where I am, jackass. What's going on? You know, th- that's that's what I wanted to say when he first pops onto the screen and he's like, "I just wanted to congratulate you on making it this far." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Don't you know where we are?" No. No, I'm in this small primitive craft. What makes you think I know at all where I'm at? You can clearly see that part of it's been damaged. Tell me what I need to know. And then he's like, "Oh, here's a message from the Central Command, and we wanted to congratulate you because coincidentally, just happened to find an ancient Bajoran crash site."
I just love the idea that like well I shouldn't say love, but I just wonder like why didn't Gul Dukat in that moment realize that oh wait a minute I have Cisco dead to rights. Like, I mean, he didn't ask him. He didn't say, "Hey, have you been trying to get a hold of Deep Space Nine and they're not getting
Mhm,
back to you?" I guess he could have figured it out by the way he was like, "I don't know where we are," but
mhm.
he could have totally captured the Cisco's, made them disappear, and like,
Oh, but
what?
you're forgetting Cardassia and Bajor have a peace treaty right now.
That's true. That's
And
right.
and
Their
since Cisco
relationship
and
is
Cisco is the emissary of the Bajoran prophets, to have him suddenly disappear while trying to complete this mission,
to
not only would he have
Cardassia.
yeah,
Yeah,
not only would he
yeah,
have angered the Bajorans, but he also would have angered Starfleet, and
yeah.
they definitely would have come looking had
Mm,
Cisco gone missing. So
right.
yeah, it was definitely in their best interest to make sure that he returns
True.
safely.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You gotta
that's
You gotta love how though in that first video call he tries throwing shade at the Maquis, like, "Oh, the
mhm.
Maquis might be dangerous. You might want to watch out for the Maquis." And Cisco's like, "Why would the Maquis care at all about any
Uh,
of this?
it's a
What's
it's
your
an
point?"
unarmed sublight craft. Like what could they possibly feel
Yeah,
threatened by? Right.
yeah,
So the craft itself, it's very unique, a very interesting design. Like
yeah,
once the sails unfurl and everything else, it kind of reminded me of a beetle with that
yeah. I was
big
gonna say that
bulbous end, and then the way the wings and
the
everything else
wings.
kind of fanned
It
out.
very did. Yeah,
Yeah. Interesting take on the concept of a spacefaring vessel, using light pressure, as Cisco says. The sails are designed of a special material that slows down the passage of photons through it, and that's how the ship is propelled. They
right.
collect enough photons behind them that it moves. And
Yeah,
then apparently the design itself is such that other small particles, energy particles, are also trapped by them. And when enough of them are trapped by it, that's how they can make spontaneous jumps to
was it
warp speed,
tachyon
which is what,
particles that got
right.
captured? Yeah.
Yes, the tachyon particles were also captured in it, and they
Which are
have a greater,
supposedly faster than light particles.
exactly.
That's
They, as I was going to
yeah,
say, they have a greater energy. They're faster than light particles, and when they built up enough of them, it pushed the ship into warp
right,
until they dissipated, and then the ship fell out of warp, and that's how they made it past the Nenorius belt and into Cardassian space.
right.
So interesting concept for
And
sure.
I'm not
Uh,
100% sure if I'm correct about this, but I do believe the technology of like light pushing objects. Like I think NASA has like moved something to like there was a
Yes,
yeah
just
went to
fairly
Mars
recently. You were
thing.
correct.
Yeah,
Just fairly recently,
yeah,
we've done something similar.
yeah,
NASA has done something similar using light pressure to move little satellites. I think they were. They have
that is
their own
it.
kind of version of a solar sail attached to them, and
Yes,
they
I don't know
can
the
move
details of
out.
it at all, but
Right.
yeah, we're like this
Yeah.
seems this was plausible technology from what I understand. Yeah, yeah, which is
So
fascinating.
yeah,
I mean, yeah,
right. fantastic idea, and
Yeah.
love to see that it actually exists,
Yeah, and it made
and
me think
so
of The Expanse, the show that really takes the idea of like science and technology very seriously. This episode was kind of doing that, and I do feel like the ship, as we already talked about, with Cisco, like just building it on a weekend, seemed a little bit simplified for what we would expect.
yeah.
But yeah, at least the element of yes, a light pressure moving an object actually makes sense on some level,
Mm,
and yeah, that's real
yeah.
world technology. So
Absolutely. I loved the overall cabin structure. I mean, it was a closer environment, so it lent itself a lot to the Cisco's and them, bonding with each other, that kind of close quarters
yeah,
for the family scenario that they had there. But the overall design of it was interesting. We didn't get to see the full scope of it, of course, due to filming and whatever else. But I like to imagine that that would have made an interesting set to like work on and be on for a while because
right,
it was so close and
right.
they've got all these overhangs and dips. And don't forget, Avery Brooks is a pretty tall individual. I
Yeah,
believe
him and
like 6'2", 6'3", and then of course Jake is
Barack Longton
growing.
is also tall too.
Yeah, yeah,
They were
growing like
both,
crazy. He's huge.
yeah, they were both kneeling down or bending over quite a bit, and I was like,
Yeah.
didn't they ever say to the team like, "Hey guys, what are you doing?
I,
Come
I
on,
mean, I'm
why are
sure
you
that
making
they,
my job
because
hard?"
it lends an air of authenticity to it. Because I mean, we all know that people were shorter hundreds of years ago than they are now,
Right,
so there is that. And so the fact that he's built this thing to be an exact replica of a ship that existed 800 years ago, we
right.
have that, but then of course again, they're both exceptionally tall, and it just kind of cracked me up a little bit that Cisco didn't take into account his own height when building the ship. And so now he's got all these like weird outcroppings and overhangs that he's got to make sure
Yeah,
he's not,
right.
banging himself into. And then it's just dangerous in the sense of you're going to be in space, man. Like, what if something happens and like you trip? You're
Yeah,
going to bang your head on something and be knocked out and adrift in
and
space
they
all because
sleep
you didn't add
on
extra clearance.
hammocks. They sleep on hammocks. I'm like,
Hammocks of all things.
yeah, like you
Hammocks.
could. I mean, I've already talked about. I feel the beds they use in like TNG is a pretty good example of like that doesn't look comfortable at all. You guys went to a mattress store and bought literally the cheapest thing you could get just to put it on your set and not charge yourselves too much.
Yeah.
It looks terrible. So a hammock. We've literally got a step down from what we were seeing on TNG.
Which also didn't, excuse me, also didn't make any sense because the where they put the hammock up, it apparently is its own little alcove in there. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, why couldn't you just put a mattress in there? And then, like, to me, that would have been a more secure place to lay instead of swinging freely
Oh, I know.
above the deck, so that if the moment something bumps you
I
or
mean, it
jostles the ship or whatever,
literally,
you're falling out.
yeah, it's like they were literally taking the idea of a sailing ship so literally that even hammocks were still being used. Okay. I mean, all right.
And I guess it would make, well, I think it makes even less sense because Ben says he built the ship to be an exact replica, except for the gravity net that he installed because weightlessness makes him queasy, which means that the original craft 800 years ago was was for a weightless environment. So them using hammocks in a weightless environment to me doesn't make any sense. You would have floated right out of it. So again, wouldn't you have wanted something a bit more sturdy and comfortable that you could have been either strapped into or laid down and then pulled a safety harness of some kind over you
That's
so
how
that
they
you
do
could
it
sleep
now.
and
In
not
the,
float away,
yeah, they
right?
do it to us at the International Space Station, if I understand correctly. They strap themselves in order to sleep. So,
That
yeah,
has got to be one heck of a unique sleeping experience to
I
sleep
know.
weightless.
I
I
know.
I would be very interested to hear, and I mean I suppose we can look it up, what astronauts think of sleeping weightless. Like, one, is it easy to get used to? Two, is it great sleep once you do get used to it? And then three, when you come home, is sleeping in a bed difficult because you've been weightless this whole time and now you're trying to get comfortable and you can just feel everything
All
on you?
gravity on you. Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
wonder.
something the Expanse talks about. Yeah.
See? See, that's the beauty of all these shows, like, because they fit into the timeline of different areas, of course, but it kind of helps to fill in the gaps of how we
Right.
get from where we are to certain other bits of technology later on. So I
Right.
like to think of the Expanse as kind of in between where we are now and what Star Trek kind of says we could be in
Right.
the very distant future. The Expanse is like smack in the middle of
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
Well, before we close it out, what did you think of this episode and us getting to revisit the Cisco's?
Um. So it was a very simple episode in terms of like there's not a lot
Hmm.
of drama. I mean, for example, the best comparison is that literally it was the season finale of season two where we had another Jake Sisko, Ben Sisko going and having father son time, and that turning drastically into a major confrontation with the Dominion and the Jim Hadar, as we find out. So part of me was wondering like how much of an escalation are we going to experience in this episode if we're using that one as a template to compare against. This one doesn't have that really. In fact, we end with literally with fireworks, a celebration, and even Bashir's confrontation turns into getting to know someone. Oh, and we forgot to mention that these episodes starts off in. I'm just going to say it in a soft core porn like
Wait,
scenario.
are you talking about Lita?
Yeah, like that.
That is a terrible characterization of Lita. She
Well,
is
she
a
comes up.
wonderful.
Doctor, I need to find.
She
That is the
was.
setup of every single bad. I was like, my
She
goodness,
was
this is
trying to
happening
get
right
the
now.
doctor's attention. She had a cough. She,
I was like, the writers of this show are clearly from. Anyway, I've said my
it was
piece.
the 90s. It was the 90s, and they could get away with more stuff. Lita turns out to be a delightful character, as we'll see later on. So we will leave
We're
that as a
gonna see more of her. Okay.
mild spoiler. Um, but I like Lita. I've
And
always
then,
liked
well,
Lita.
it was so funny because who interrupts them talking like that? Oh, I'm getting a cough too. I need to take you back to the infirmary. But Dax is like, he says, "You can call me Bashir." It was like
which is
she
which is so
interrupts
great
just in the right time.
because we all know how much Bashir used to chase her around.
I know.
And so now here
Yes.
comes Lita, and he has absolutely no time for Dax. And he even writes it in the pad, go away. This woman that he has been since the moment that we met both of these characters. Remember, we met them both virtually at the same
Sin.
time.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yep.
he has been after her every moment, even fantasizing about her so that in the episode, If Wishes Were Horses, he had his own
Very
imaginary
affectionate
version of
version
her.
of her. Yeah,
Yeah,
following her
very
around.
amorous version, right?
Yes.
So now all of a sudden he's got the attention of the beautiful Lita, and he
Right.
is like, "Go away." So interesting how she coughs in his face, and now she's got all of his attention. So,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, I don't have any problem with her though. I like her. So
Okay, great. I
there,
mean, if we're to see more of her and find out more about her, but I just remember watching this episode opening up and being like, "What is
she's a
happening? This is a
Dabo
parody."
girl. She's a Dabo
I
girl.
know.
They're supposed to be.
Well, I
Hey,
just love the idea that there was the Jabo girl that Jake was dating, a while
Marta.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was actually like more than meets the eye. And then here's this chick, and she is absolutely not.
So interesting fact about the character or the actress who plays Lita. She originally auditioned to play the character Marta.
Oh, there we go.
However, Avery
She
Brooks,
was
upon seeing her, said that she was too old to play
for
the
the
part
part.
of Marta, but
Yeah,
they
it makes
brought her
sense.
back as Lita because she is and I don't want to say significantly older than Marta, but she was older. So,
Right,
and remember at the time, Jake is 16, and Marta was supposed to be 20, I think.
right.
So
Oh no,
yeah,
she was like, oh yeah, I forget, but the actress was like the right age for the part. Yeah,
yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. The actress was age appropriate, but the character was supposed to be 20 to Jake's 16. And
Right.
then the actress who plays Lita, when she auditioned for the part of Marta, she was like 27. So they're like, no.
Hmm. Yeah, she definitely looks closer to 30, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Or I'm saying when she auditioned for Marta, not Lita. So when go
No,
back.
I know. My point is that yeah, she definitely looks older. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. She was too old for that
yeah.
part. But we've got her back. She's a very interesting character, as we're going to find out. But yeah. So overall, you're gonna give this episode thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs
Eh,
neutral. What do you think?
I'll say. I mean, it's not like it was a bad episode. I guess. Well, I feel like the Solar Sailor was. I mean, it was one of those things where, like, as we pointed out, it like the hammock, like
Hmm.
it was a little campy, I guess.
Hmm.
I mean, whatever. I don't want to hit on it too hard. I just again,
No.
the last episode had big dramatic payoffs. This one
Yeah.
is very different. And of course, I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad. I'm just like in some ways you want that. You want the variation. But I like more of the dramatic stuff that we got last time. I'd rather have more of that than more of this, even if that means that we're getting a wider variety of types of episodes.
Right.
So it's one of those
Well,
things, like, I've seen this episode now and I can skip it in the future. I wouldn't put it on a much watch list, though. According to what I'm seeing on Wikipedia, there is a much watch list, and this is one of the ones that's on there because of the Jake
well, I
Sisko
think
element. So,
yeah, I was gonna say I think this is one of those that you come back to after you kind of been through the series a few times. Like for me, this is an episode that stands out that I would come back to mainly for again the Cisco's. I
mm,
like seeing that family dynamic, and I mean I
right,
remember again growing up and not seeing that and very much enjoying that, and now as a single father myself I really enjoy watching it because I mean in a lot of ways I would like to think that Ben Cisco is the kind of father that I want to be and that
right,
I hope that I am. I
right,
want to be a person who listens to my child. I don't overrule them. I'm not authoritative. I'm not shutting down their ideas and their ambitions. I'm
right,
trying to find ways to help them and encourage them and guide them without
right,
making the decisions for them.
right,
That's kind of how I hope that in the end, when my child is obviously much older, she'll be able to say, that's
mm,
it. You know,
right,
so I enjoy that. I also enjoyed this episode for being able to see a different design of ship. Like we've talked a lot about the Bajorans and Bajoran culture and the things they were able to do and whatever else, but we never really see any of it until
right,
now. And this is the first that's or we can take it as a true Bajoran design, not Bajoran informed by Cardassian, not Bajoran informed by Federation, but true Bajoran design from 800 years ago. So this is where they were at with their
right.
with their technology and ability and so forth. I enjoyed the banter between Bashir and O'Brien and seeing that kind of
Yes,
the true beginning of their friendship. Like you can kind of see it in other episodes, kind of getting there, going from the grudging annoyance of O'Brien to this tolerance and acceptance to now they're drinking buddies.
yeah,
Um, and
good.
another scene that I really enjoyed was also with O'Brien, and it was with Kira when Cisco tells them that he's going to build the ship. And O'Brien's like, I've looked over the schematics and I don't think that this is right at all, and Kira's
You're
fiercely
being a
defending her
Romulan
people. Right.
or a
She's
Cardassian. You're
fiercely
a
defending her
Cardassian.
people. Right. And she's like, you sound just like a Cardassian. They've never believed that we've been doing this for hundreds of years before them. And he's like, well, you sound like a Romulan. And so it's just, I love that back and forth. And
Yeah,
so little moments like that, again, stand out to me, a person who's watched this many times
right.
versus like I can understand for you, like as a person, you're just now going through this, you understand the story and everything else, but not necessarily one that you would come back to later on. Now, if you are so inclined after we watch this all the way through, if later on you want to go back through the series a few times or whatever else and find episodes to stand out to you, see how you feel then. It'd be different. But yeah, I get both arguments, but that's why I would come back to this one. Those little tidbit
Yeah.
moments that inform more of the characters I like.
Yeah, and I know we're running long, really long,
Yep.
but there's another little moment about that when Dax and Cisco are talking, and she says to Cisco, I haven't seen you this devoted to a project since Jake was, um, still
When
not
you,
yet
when,
born, the
yeah,
nursery.
when you guys said that you were going
So
to have a
apparently
baby,
Cisco
and
does
yeah,
get these moons. Yeah, he
yeah.
does get these moons, but it also means that it's been like 16, 17 years since one of these moods has apparently come upon him. I mean, okay, fine. I'm sure that's maybe the
Well,
best example that Dax could think of. Um,
Well, keep in
but yeah,
mind that with
that's
this,
another
this is
character
also
moment.
kind of,
Yeah.
and this also kind of informs us too more about the Cisco character. Because remember, when we first meet Dax, she says something very serious, similar to this to Bashir. Then she says she was very glad to see that he had taken the assignment because Cisco had been very much, kind of checked out of life at this point. His wife had died. He was obviously
Right.
suffering PTSD wise, trying to raise his son. He just really wasn't engaged in life at all. And
Right.
so Dax reminds him of that a little bit when she talks about it then, and then she's doing it here now. So this is kind of our a nice but a nice gentle but important reminder that we are seeing Cisco re-engaging in life again, which I think is very interesting that Jake is also pushing him to begin dating again because he has gone from this kind of broken shell of a man to slowly but surely rediscovering himself, rediscovering his purpose and focus and drive, and moving into getting back into life again. So
Right.
again, a lot of different things we can learn about Cisco and also kind of help yourselves a little bit for people who've been through similar situations and have things that take you out of living and enjoying life. Here is a person who has found ways to kind of get back into the game again.
Right.
He's going off on cultural retreats and learning about new cultures. He's building spaceships. He's building clocks in his, he's got that clock thing that he sits on his desk, which I'm still very envious of. Cisco
Right.
is a builder. He's a very hands-on guy. He was
Right.
working at the Utopia Planitia shipyards before he came to Bajor, building ships and stuff. So I mean, that's what he does, and that's kind of his, I guess, therapy to work through things.
Right.
And we're seeing him on the other side of it being a fully, a more fully functioning character, a
Right.
person.
Right.
So
Yeah.
lots of good stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that will do it. We did run um a bit long, but that's okay. We obviously have a lot to talk about, and we're good. Before we totally end everything out, just want to say we are on the countdown to the new and final episode, or not episode, but season of Star Trek Picard, which will be featuring the return of the original TNG cast. That drops on February 16th, which is a Thursday. So be ready for that. I'm sure that since it'll be on the 16th, and then we normally have our episodes, on the weekends. Probably give you some stuff there, reactions or whatever about that. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, you can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify, and you can find us anywhere that you have social media: Facebook, Twitter, and of course, we're now on YouTube. So you can watch us there, comment there, and so forth. But as always, until next week, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.